Hi everyone, Steve Stahlberg here with another tutorial video, this time about how to change the lighting from high key to low key. You can do this with your own art, as in this case, or you can do it with photorefs too. In fact, you very often have to change the lighting in a photoref, so it's a useful tool to know how to use. So the most common case for me anyway is to go from high key or well lit to darker, like when a director shoots day for night. In this case it's dusk or sunset, you'll see. With the sun behind the character to create a nice rim light. In fact, this is the worst case scenario right here, as the starting point is maximum midday sunlight coming down full frontal on a shiny metal subject and straight down on the face of the actor, making them squint. Any photographer would give up on ever making this look like night or dusk, but with painting and some patience it can be done. Here's the reference for the lighting I plan to use. And first, as you saw, separate any important objects like characters onto their own layer. You saw that just before that. Just make it easier and quicker to work. And I'll start by darkening the background. And if you copied, obviously if you copied the main subject onto another layer, you now have two edges everywhere around the edges. So you're gonna have to remove the lower one. You're gonna have to smudge the background into the inside the edges or paint over them. Like here, I'm smudging the edges in with my trusty smudge tool. It's just a tool I use all the time for many different things. And the background layer I just darken very roughly, just with curves, just pull them straight down, no big deal. The character is trickier. This one, what you have to do is you have to reduce contrast everywhere, especially in such a sunlit subject. You really have to smash those contrasts, but you can't do it all at once, all in one operation. So to start with, I'm just sort of bending the curve a bit here in a nice S shape, and it'll go a bit grayish too, which is just good because colors diminish when you have darker lighting anyway. So yeah, something like this to start with is still, this takes you about, I don't know, not even halfway, but it's a good start. It's a good base to start to work from. Yeah, the darkest parts don't need to be changed at all, really. The brightest parts need to be pulled down a lot. And what I'm going to be doing now, gently and patiently, is to work on the brightest parts. First I'm bluing them up a little bit, darkening them slightly, but I'll just progressively darken them more and more. What I'm trying to do here also is preserve the detail, which often happens with photos as well. You'll often, like always, pretty much always, if you're using a reference, presumably you're using it because you liked something in it. Usually it's the texture, the fine details, and if you're changing the lighting, you just need to work on the lighting and not the fine texture details. So here I'm trying to keep those. In this case it's brushstroke details that I have from the original, which actually I can show you. So this is the original, and you can see all the brush strokes here. I'm trying to keep all this stuff. So there are a couple of ways to do that. One way you'll see me use later here is the dodge and burn tool, set appropriately. Each one of those dodge and burn, they have 3 settings, but what I'm doing right here is I'm removing the sharp and deep dark cast shadows that only happen with your strong directional sunlight source, sun type light source. The shoulder armor, for instance, casting its shadow down onto the breast armor, you have to remove that because presumably there's the sun is in a different position now. It's going to be back here somewhere. So even if it's moonlight doesn't, I mean, it's the same size of a light source, but because it's so much darker, and also it's not always full moon, you know, I guess we pretend it's full moon, we paint it like it's full moon. We paint it stronger than full moon usually, because otherwise you won't see much. Illustration is, you know, it's fakery like Hollywood, but yeah, the moonlight shadows are not at all as strong and defined and pitch black as they are sometimes in sunlight. So yeah, here you see more shadows that need to be getting rid of there, here, yeah, this one, trying to hit all those little shadows, and especially in her face. I'm gonna treat that separately a little bit later. Right now I'm working on the armor and smooshing the highlights down further by painting on top of them. And as I said, another way is you could use multiply in your brush. I'm gonna start the rim now. Next, using a gold color. And yeah, and this part is very easy to do. If you just lock down the transparency of your layer, this particular layer that I'm painting on here, it works like a mask. And I'm going to find out as I'm doing this that there are some overlapping edges there. There's some edges on the background that I've neglected to remove. I just easily paint over those real quick when I find them. I think there's here in them around the waist, if I remember correctly. And I'll be warming this rim light up more later. There's the horse's tail back there. Could probably skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, see, I'm warming it up now. But of course later I'll be going over it again with red, like deep cherry red, or glowing metal type red, in screen or color dodge mode. Especially here you'll see me do that. Not so much on the metal, because metal doesn't have a subsurface scattering component at all, but the hair will have a lot of it. Especially here at the wider part, less so up here, because up here it's just more tightly packed against the skull, and here is flying a bit more freely. Similar with the mane, I'll be adding that later as well, but not as much, because if the sun is on our left here, so I was imagining some shadow falling on the mane, like it wasn't catching super strong sunlight. And this is just mimicking some trees in the background. I should have gone with a deeper, darker burnt orange type first, and then with wider brush strokes, and then narrower brush strokes for this particular more gold color. But you can do it the reverse way too. It just would have been a bit quicker to do it the other way. You'll see how later I have to go back and sort of warm up the edges of this light. But this is basically a sunset happening behind her with trees, as you saw in the reference that I showed you earlier. I'm color picking from the reference. It's sitting next to this window on the desktop, and I'm using it as a reference continuously as I go. And here I'm bringing the more of that orangey color in. Which I belatedly thought of. It's just quicker to do it the other way around. The end result is about the same. Anyway. Yeah, her armor here is all not very strong blue, but a slight bluish tint here in all the gray parts. All the parts that would have been gray in normal white light turn slightly blue in this kind of lighting setup, because the warm light is behind her, and in front of her she has an empty even if it's slightly cloudy, it'll be a bluish sky. Slightly cold colors over here. Bluish greenish was actually in the reference was more greenish, maybe because there was something green in front of her, or color was tweaked in the photo. I don't know. You make up your own mind what you want. I wanted it to be not actually green here, but more pure blue. And after this, I'm going to go back to the main subject again. I tried to add some interest in the background as well, some misty layers. Maybe we can jump a little bit again. Yeah. Here's that added interest I'm talking about, like not just a featureless flat surface, but some stuff happening in back there. It doesn't take much, you know, some hints like this. Some mist floating on the meadows. I'm using a big dotted brush that creates lots of fine random streaks, trying to make it look a bit oil painterly, as you can see up here, most clearly here. I like to use fade last stroke set to different modes, but fade, you'll see me use it, is very convenient when you want to make a big quick change without having to make a mask first. You make a brush stroke sort of like where you want the mask to be, make it way too strong, and then you use fade to just fade a fraction of it in, and it gives you many options, because right as you're doing the fade, you can also change the stroke to color or color dodge or multiply or whatever. So it actually helps creativity for me to happen more intuitively, so you don't have to plan ahead every single step of your operation. You can do a lot of experimenting when you use that fade thing. It's also good for using clumsy brushes. Sometimes you have a brush like, if, for instance, the default airbrush is very clumsy. It unless you adjust it, it triggers very easily and leaves blobs and crap. It comes on too strong. So then you can do, if you don't want it blobby, you can do maximum pressure, you know, and make it very consistent brushstroke, and then you can fade it down to almost like 0.01, you know, very subtle if you want. Otherwise it's very hard to be subtle with the default airbrush. Here I'm adding more of that sort of bluish, because what I also have to do is I have to widen these highlights which were here before. If you remember, they were kind of localized, and so since there's no such sharp localized light source back here now anymore, but this is the sky, then you have to sort of widen them, especially horizontally. If you have to think about where is the bending of the metal to catch the reflection in the right way. This will not reflect the sky. Her lower chest will not reflect the sky. It will be reflecting the horse and the ground in front of her, and the horizon will sit right where the peak of the curve changes from, you know, from facing downwards to facing upwards. Is probably around where the nipples are. That's where a straight line across her chest will be reflecting the horizon. And here also, this is slightly upward facing, as we could see, because you can use the original photo. You can also have that open next to you on the desktop. The original photo can be used as a reference, because it'll tell you which way is the armor facing, each piece of armor. So this part of the knee here was facing towards the sun, because you remember there was a very sharp highlight right there. And same here, very sharp highlight. So you know exactly where those areas are facing. Exactly. You know exactly if you think about it. and the glove, etc., etc. And here you remember before, and I try to still keep that as well. This part is facing up and this part is facing down. So then the horizon would end up right in the fold line right there. And here you can see I'm using the fade set to color. I'm slowly fading it in. I set it to color there and then drag it slowly. This is a very interactive process that you can keep your eyes here as you're dragging down here. It is, I just love doing that. It's so easy and intuitive. Again, I'm doing it. And the purpose here is to make the reflection even more blue. Skylight blue. And I will be doing that to the horse as well. I'll be bluing up the horse because he started out as gray. In the sunlight he's gray, but now he has to have a cooler color. Her face actually ended up cooler because it started out orangey, as skin does in sunlight, but as you pull down in the curve, you just simply make it darker, it turns cooler. That's just a weird thing with color theory that happens to warm colors. As you pull down the curve in the right way, in the specific way that you saw me do it there, that cools the color. So this is now viewed by us as almost as bluish. It's not bluish, it still has a hint of orange in it, but we view it as cooler, more towards blue because of the graying of the orange. Same thing would happen here. If I applied gray on top of this, this would all look cooler. That's just basic color theory. Yeah. So I'm trying not to be as cool here because this is reflecting the ground, as I said. I'm trying to be bluer here and less blue here. Same thing here. This is catching. It was looking very dull and unexciting before when this was just gray, you know. So I added a little bit of a stronger hint of blue there just to break things up a little bit. You see the red here. The red at the bottom is what I started off after the initial curve pulling down. I found that the red was so strong a color that it actually needed actual blue painted on top of it to make it more dusk color. And here is the horse. I blew down the horse there. All of this was yellow once. This was gold. But I'm gonna actually make this part catch a little bit of sunlight, and I'm gonna make the reins here catch sunlight as well, and a little bit on the neck of the horse there also. I'm gonna make that. And next I'm gonna start on her face properly, which I'll be doing in two different parts, sort of two different sections. I'll start working on it, and then I'll go somewhere else, and then I'm gonna have to come back to the face because it wasn't good enough. Yeah, just starting on the. Maybe I can jump a little bit. Yep. Okay, so cleaning up the hair a little bit. Don't want to clean it up too much because I kind of like some of those, how shall I say, random happy accident brushstrokes that are still there from the original sort of sketchy way I painted this. And you can still see some of the texture here in the armor. I've accidentally, it wasn't my purpose, but I have flattened a bit of it. It's slightly less strongly textured now than it was before, but then again I also managed to keep a lot of that texture, and as long as you have some of it left, you can always sharpen it back up again using unsharp mask, or of course I could just paint it back in, you know, but want to avoid that because that's concept art is all about, you know, speed. You got to do everything as fast as you can. I'm not working terribly fast here right now, but you know, I'm not the fastest guy in the universe, but it's I don't want to have to repaint this whole thing, you know, with a different light. That would make it take like 5 times longer, you know. But I will have to repaint a little bit these eyes, because as you see, when direct sunlight hits somebody's face, you get these shadows that I just erased here. I'm trying to erase. You gotta soften the shadows, and you gotta erase some of them completely, and you gotta just flatten the face light-wise, like the brights down and the darks up a little bit. I think there was some very dark shadows right here on the lips and on the jawline here. And I'm gonna have to repaint the eyebrows a little bit later. I'm gonna have to repaint the sclera, the iris. Opening up the eyelid a little bit means that you can see the whites of the eyes, which you couldn't before. And yeah, just basically repaint some of these things. I'll show you my... Eventually we're gonna get to this. This is the final, but for now we're still at this level here, and I'll talk you through the rest of it. From now on there's mainly just detailing left, and this is the sad truth of most illustration work, including all the tutorials that I do, that the last half or last third becomes very boring to watch, because the changes slow down, the rate of change slows down, because it's smaller and smaller changes that happen during the same time frame. So what I usually do, I speed it up. This hasn't been speeded up, so it's taking a little bit longer than usual, but normally I speed it up like 10 times the speed. And see, I'm bluing up all the upward facing parts of the face, the sky facing parts, making them even more blue than they were before. And now I'm taking a look, and now I'm going to start detailing even more. I'm going to use color dodge. I'm going to brighten up the edges here, like I mentioned before. It's fairly easy to do. You just run a warm color in color dodge mode with pretty much any brush across the edge like this, and it's still masked off, so nothing is applied to the background. I think this is where I go add it on the reins, on the horse's head, and on the neck. Just these tiny details. They have to be worked on, but it's not very exciting to watch. And the mane, I'm warming up the mane there like I mentioned I would. Imagining that the light is coming from over here somewhere, sunlight streaking past her left shoulder, hitting the left side, their left, our right, this part of the mane here. I reduced this part a little bit, or maybe it's streaking through this armhole, maybe it's streaking through, it depends on the exact angle, which I left undiscovered. I didn't actually draw. Sometimes you can draw construction lines for the light with perspective and everything. Construction lines can be useful for everything in an image. In this case I didn't need them for the objects because they were already there. They were already finalized and finished and painted, so no construction was needed for the actual subjects. But yeah, I could have done some quick lines just to show myself where the angle of the sun is and stuff, but I winged it, normally I don't recommend winging it like that. It's always good to be safe. Better to be safe than sorry, but in this case it's fairly easy. to kind of imagine roughly what the light is doing. And another added complication, if I wanted to construct the lights in that way, to view it perspective-wise, well, I could use a 3D program, of course, but it's in real life this could be an area light, not a point light. I mean, an entire cloud bank could be glowing, covering the sun, and so the whole like a whole quarter of the sky could be glowing, casting its light. So it could be a complex shape, not just a point light anymore. So yes, in this particular type of situation, it would have been probably a waste of time to try to construct the light. Although later you'll see me I add actually after I stopped recording this video, I added some breath from the horse's breath and her breath, some steam coming off, lighting up, which I showed you before. It's you can see here and here. So in this case you have to sort of imagine where the edge of her body is, where, you know, how the light is coming in, and I imagine that this is either her shoulder or her, yeah, I guess that's her shoulder. So in this case I should have probably, I think it's almost okay. It should have been a bit lower, I think, now that I look at it. You see what I mean, right? The shoulder is here. It should have been, this looks like the sunlight is actually coming from below the horizon, just below the horizon over there. So that's a slight mistake right there, but that's what you get when you don't use construction lines. Take that as a warning. Okay, more detailing. I am brightening up. The first layer I put down wasn't bright enough, strong enough, so that's easy to fix. You just color dodge it up a little bit more there. Shortly I'm gonna go back to her face again. Jump ahead a little bit. Now I'm using red, dark red, to do that glowy thing that I mentioned earlier. But I'm using lighten to make sure not to make any of the brighter parts reddish, because they were. I'm happy with the golden color they have. I just wanted to make the darker parts slightly more reddish glow. And in the final, you can see here on the hair, I'll show you here also, because I didn't record this part. Again, I made this quite a lot of red there, as you can see. Yes, darkening this part, because in the original there was bounce light, bright sunlit day, there was bounce light hitting the neck of the horse, making it brighter. Now in this sort of dark version, the ambient occlusion happens a bit more strongly right there. And we're back to the face, and now I'm gonna attempt to paint the eyes to have the color and shading that they would have in a dark environment, which is also very tricky, because eyes are shiny. Eyes are maybe even shinier than a suit of armor. They are all covered with liquid, so they're very shiny. You see there's a bit of a shadow here too that has to be removed or softened, because that kind of indicates a sunlight situation as well. Here, yeah, I'm adding I'm sort of clarifying the iris by showing the sclera, the white of the eye. And she won't have pinpoint highlights in the eyes because there's no point light source back here, but it'll be like a horizon. You see, there'll be like the sky will be reflecting in her pupil and iris. The ground is dark, so this is what you see. You see the horizon going through the middle of the eye, like that. Unless she's facing a wall or a lot of forest right there, then you wouldn't see any highlights at all. But even in dusk, the sky is slightly lighter than the ground. The ground is always like completely, it's reflecting no light at all in this situation. Because especially dark green, like forest, it just soaks up the light. In especially low light situation like this, where there's just a little bit of dusky orange sunlight coming through, it just doesn't bounce off trees back to her eyes. So any tree here, like if there was even stone, most materials would be just black, like no reflection would be happening there. And then, so what you have to do is you have to sort of select the sky and just deselecting everything that sticks up into the sky, like a house or a tree, and then spray paint gently, not too much, with the sky color. Whatever the sky color is at about maybe 50%, spray that gently onto the shiny. That's how you would do a shiny sphere, shiny spherical object. That is, that's what the eyeball is. Also a little bit on the nose, a little bit of a similar situation on the nose, though it's not as shiny because it's oily more than watery, so it has a bit of a more blurry reflection. But it would be the exact same reflection here as here, just a bit blurrier and a bit softer, not as strongly reflecting. In this case it looks like she has very dry lips, which wasn't on purpose, it just happened that way. But if she has no makeup on, she's a woman of action, she's been out warring all day, yeah, she might have some fairly dry lips there. She wants to have a drink of water. I think this is nearly done now. Jump ahead a little bit. Yep. This is the end, and I'm showing here a comparison between before and after, but I actually, as I mentioned, did a little bit more work here, so this is the actual comparison, the actual final. Yeah, this is the volumetric effect of the steam cloud produced by her breath. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thank you, hope you liked it. Bye.